Call the meeting back to order if members in the audience could have their seat. This time I want to call before us the next people to testify, Jaime Montoya, who's been at this for a long time. Come on up, Jaime. Appreciate you. And Ashley Taylor. Ashley, come on up, have a seat. These folks have been visiting me for years now, especially you, Jaime. It's good to see you and your guests here, and I appreciate your passion for this issue and your patience with me. You've been before us many times, and please introduce yourselves for the record. I'd like to ask the members to try to refrain from the sidebars so we can concentrate on the testimony. If you'd introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm really honored to be here. My name is Jaime Montalvo. I'm the Executive Director of Kentuckians for Medicinal Marijuana.
My name is Ashley Taylor, and thank you all so much for your time today. I'm a Kentucky native who grew up in central Kentucky, graduated from Eastern Kentucky University, and essentially have been immersed in the cannabis industry for the past 3.5, 4 years, with hopes to be able to share some information that I have that I think could benefit what our representatives have put together and you all have heard about today.
And of course, you guys know Eric Crawford. He's another director with Kentuckians for
Eric,
Medicinal
good
Marijuana.
to see you again. You're no stranger in these halls either. Good to see you again. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
First, I'd like to really thank Representative Nemes and Representative St. Ange for presenting their bill here. There's a few members in the audience here of the members of the committee.
Well, we don't have a bill yet, but we're hoping to see one soon.
Correct, I'm sorry. There are members in the committee that sponsored the former bill. So I want to thank them for their help in all of this. I'd also like to, explain that I never pictured myself being a medical marijuana advocate. I know that Representative St. Ange and Representative Neves never dreamed of it either. This is a little bit out of our norm, but it's something that we feel that the patients truly need, and it's time to happen. The discussions have been going on for quite a few years. I started this in 2014, and as you guys have mentioned, the discussions have really grown since then. I'd like to first start by asking the members of the committee just one question. How many of you have been affected by cancer or chemotherapy? Many of us, our family members, close relatives have been affected by chemotherapy or cancer. And many of us know that our friends or really close family members have consumed cannabis. And that cannabis that's been consumed, or marijuana, in most instances has been smoked marijuana. I know that personally I am a cancer survivor, and I know that cannabis, smoked cannabis, is what helped me get through chemotherapy and my multiple sclerosis medications. I know that that's what helped me cope with my side effects, and that's why I'm here walking today without a cane. You've seen my ups and downs throughout these years, and that has been the absence and the presence of cannabis. Many of us in society here are affected by that. It's the white lie that we hold behind closed doors. Many of us know that our friends or family members are consuming cannabis, and it's an accepted norm. And I think that it's time that we need to change that. And 31 states have acted in that favor. They have defended patients' rights to cannabis. And we went into the debate of whether we have oils or flower. It's not necessarily about smoked marijuana. It's about having access to that flower, because the access to that flower allows you to use cannabis in really any form. If you only allow the sale of concentrated oils or pills, patients aren't going to be using that, just like they aren't using it in Minnesota, New York, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, nor Florida. Those states only regulated oils and pills in regards to cannabis. And patients are slow to join those programs because those products are out of reach. They're not covered by insurance. They're totally out of pocket. Most patients don't know what the pills or oils are. They're unaware but they do know that smoking marijuana helps them ease their pain or their nausea. Now, I'm going to bring out something that we legalized back in 2014, which is CBD oil. These oils are being sold across the state. They are technically, by federal definition, hemp. They are below 0.3% THC. Patients are using this as an oil. They're using it as a pill. They're using it as a vape. They're using it in many different forms, a salve. But what we know is continued use of these products are leading people in the general public to test positive for marijuana. Not for hemp, not for CBD, but for marijuana. It's causing people to lose jobs, causing people to lose medications, and it's causing people to lose child custody. That is why I'm here today. I fight so that patients like me or like Eric or like others in these rooms don't have to lose their children because they test positive for marijuana. In Kentucky, you lose your child, not for possession, not for cultivation, but the simple act of testing positive says to the state that you are a neglectful parent. Even though CPS understands that these people are using marijuana instead of opioids, instead of alcohol, in my case, that's what held true. Psychiatrists, sociologists, all the credentialed people along the way explain, so you don't drink, you don't use alcohol, you don't use other drugs, you just use marijuana. Well, just get through the program and you'll get back to life, you'll get back to your child, life will be normal again. And that's true. Life did get back to normal 6 months later. Imagine the emotional turmoil that causes for a child. My child didn't know I was doing anything wrong. He knew that I was finally able to ride bicycles with him and exercise, and I was able to be a more lively parent. That's what cannabis did for me. So the whole point of this is that people consuming a legal product here in the state are testing for an illegal product. That's the only point of bringing this forward here. Now, in the states that have regulated only oils, those oils are highly priced, like I mentioned. We follow a patient from northern Kentucky. I believe he's from your area, Representative Koenig. Moved to Minneapolis, and she's acquiring these CBD oils. Her parents are well off. She is subtherapeutic on her cannabis oil because Minnesota only allows particular plants to be grown and particular products to be sold, only pills, oils of a certain concentration. That child is using $2,500 worth of oil a month, and she's still subtherapeutic. In order to get to the therapeutic range, it's $5,000. How many Kentuckians do you think will have $5,000 readable cash to spend on a product that may or may not help them? It's not insurance covered. Now, with the whole job loss and all of that, you guys did touch on the testing positive. I wanted to touch on a few questions that some of the members had during the previous presentation, because there are various bills. We are here presenting in regards to Senate Bill 118, which was filed by Senator West. We also defend House Bill 166 because it has been talked about by multiple groups across the state. We have been traveling the state discussing the bill with many stakeholders, and that is why our bill is so thorough. So in regards to how much would a program like this cost the state, I can tell you back in 2014, when we had a thoroughly written bill, just like we had this past session, it was previously run through the health department. The Kentucky Health Department estimated that it would cost $2 to $4 million to regulate such a program. Now that fee or that cost, but from the state, is covered by the licenses and the excise tax from the program. So the program pays for itself. Now, in regards to Representative Moser's question about Colorado and full legalization, you did mention that they did legalize medical in 2000. Now, in 2000, the Colorado legislative members acted in good faith towards patients. They defended patients' rights to cannabis. in the raw form. They allowed patients to cultivate. They allowed patients to have caregivers. They did not allow the sale until 10 years later, because it took 10 years for the legislative members of the body to finally come in agreement on how are we going to regulate this plant? What are we going to do? So they couldn't come into an agreement, so they allowed the patient to have access to that flower. Now, in defense of what we're discussing here, they didn't do a very good job at regulating it. They had a lot of flaws. They had a lot of problems in their bill. And throughout, from 2000 up until now, they have been trying to fix that legislation. So what we did is we traveled to Colorado and we met with regulators, we met with policymakers, and we learned what those pitfalls were. And that is why, again, Senate Bill 118 is so thorough. That is why it's a 100-page bill, because we covered the driving impaired issue. How do we treat that today? How do we treat marijuana in Kentucky today? Is it non-existent? Do we arrest anyone for marijuana in Kentucky? The answer to that is yes. We arrest 16,000 people plus a year for marijuana possession alone. Obviously, some of those people are driving impaired. There is absolutely no way that I can quantify how many of those are patients. But what we can extrapolate from that is that not one single death has come from it. There is not one documented death in the 16,000 arrests that we had last year. How about this previous year, 16,000? Not a single death. You guys have sat through many more discussions here in Frankfurt than I have. You've seen many more slideshows than I have about the opioid epidemic. Do any of those slides include deaths from marijuana? No, they don't exist. Marijuana is here today. Now, what we're talking about in our bill, in Senate Bill 118, is a tightly regulated medical cannabis bill. We kind of changed it from calling it medical marijuana. Now we're calling it marijuana for qualifying conditions. Because you're right, it's not approved as a medicine. What a physician can do is they can recommend you to use cannabis, just like they can recommend you to use an ACE wrap, or they can recommend you to use ice for that swollen joint. They can recommend anything they want. Now, what the states are doing is they're taking their states' rights, which the federal government is granting in this sense, and they are regulating cannabis as tightly as they see fit, or as tightly really as they can agree on. What we're asking for is tightly regulated bill, qualifying conditions. We shared some of the qualifying conditions this past session. Some of the members felt that some of the conditions were too broad, so we tightened them. Now we talked about the home grow situation. Now I defended why we go for the flower. Now the reason why we also defended is we made our bill opt-in. The reason our bill is opt-in is because we don't want to force those local communities to spend any sort of money trying to get rid of it or prevent it from having sales in their community. If we make it opt-out, you're forcing those local communities to spend money. We don't want that. Now, it's a limited bill. There are going to be local communities that are going to vote for it because they're going to be voting to bring in jobs, excise tax revenue, and be able to enforce it in their local area. Now,
Jaime,
again, yes, sir.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you have two other people sitting there,
Yes,
and we're 20 minutes into this, and I've got to be
Okay.
out the door at noon.
Okay.
Now, you're referring to the bill from last year?
Senate Bill 118, which was filed by Senator West last year. Yes,
Last year, okay. And
Yes, sir.
are you anticipating any changes to what was filed last year?
We have tightened it up more through the discussions with members throughout the community.
But that's not on paper yet.
Not officially filed. And that is what we're hoping through this committee meeting, that we can tighten it up that much more.
Okay.
What we did do is one way that we tightened it, sir, is that patients who do opt to grow, yes, they have to get a license. Yes, they have to notify the state that they're growing. But in addition to that, they're also registering with the local sheriff. Every county across Kentucky has a sheriff's department. You pay a local fee. You you register with that local sheriff, and you stay in compliance. We talked about law enforcement coming into your home in case you're they need to investigate. Yes, they have that right to come into your home, but they don't have the right to harass you. If for some reason they see you selling marijuana, or they have built a case against you, which they do have the right for trafficking, that is different than medical marijuana, they can intervene. So I'll just present this one pager that we have, our 100-page bill into one page.
Is that in the packet?
Yes, sir. It's in that packet that you have.
Members take note.
Yes, sir. So it just breaks down the bill. We build a department. It run through the state. It's opt-in. Local areas get 20%. They get to use that funding for enforcement, drug enforcement. Patients have to have a qualifying condition. They have to have a qualifying practitioner. That practitioner has to be certified. And they have to have a card. There's no DUI, no public consumption. Everyone has to be licensed. And there's no advertising, no billboards, no radio, no TV advertising. We want to keep it away from our children. Any products sold have to be in a child-proof container that is opaque, that is...
Thank you. Is all that on the sheet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Before Ashley, I have a member that has a question, has been waiting very patiently. Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. It's nice to see you again. I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate your passion about this whole issue. And you know that I have a lot of questions about this, and I'm not looking to disenfranchise anyone or take anyone's medications away. But I do think that there are some issues that need to be clarified, and I think we all have a lot of questions, and hopefully we can get some of this answered. I would just like to clarify that physicians can and must recommend this because they would put their DEA license at risk, correct?
A prescription would put their DEA license at risk.
Precisely, and that's why they have to recommend. Okay.
Correct, and that has been upheld by the Supreme Court.
Correct. Right, just to clarify that. And that we don't have data on therapeutic levels needed for various conditions, and we don't really have opioid death data. It's anecdotal. I mean, I hesitate to say that we should legalize something in order to research it. I mean, lifting the federal ban to research it, researching hemp and the cannabidiols in hemp and fractured THC, which is what we did with allowing cannabidiols, which allowed Epidiolex to be prescribed because it's now FDA approved. What is the issue then with utilizing the FDA approval process for really deriving exactly what we need, knowing what we are going to indicate or use these medications for, what they're indicated for, proper dosing, safety and efficacy, effectiveness of the medications and so forth?
Well, every medication, whether prescribed or over the counter, has an LD50 level. And the LD50 level of cannabis hasn't really been found because you simply can't overdose off of cannabis. You can overdose off of Tylenol, you can overdose off of opioids or any real prescription bought at Walgreens or any other pharmaceutical place like that. You can't overdose off of cannabis. Now, when it comes to the FDA approving cannabis as a botanical, I personally don't believe that it will happen. And the reason that is because there are too many variables that can happen with a botanical plant. A drought or a flood could affect the concentration of the cannabinoids in the long run, in the end, therefore changing the concentration of that flower. When you're making an oil, that oil is a definite concentration. That's different than, again, the flower. What people are using today is cannabis in its raw form. That is the flower. It is the weakest form that you could use it. What we're debating is an oil. It takes a whole, say for instance something like this, it takes half a pound to make something like this. It's a concentrated oil. It takes a lot to produce a very little bit. So what we're doing by only allowing the pills or oils is having patients, because we are talking about qualifying conditions, we're having patients jump from I'm sorry about the crude example, but going from, instead of starting with beer, starting with bourbon. You don't want somebody starting with the strongest stuff because, it may cause an adverse effect. It may cause them to, say, their blood pressure to go down. It can cause that. It can cause a heart rate to go up. It can potentially cause somebody to say, they got dizzy and they passed out. It can cause something like that. We're not saying that it is, absolutely harmless. There are different side effects that can potentially happen, but none of them include death.
Well, I think you made my point for me. Thank you. In that we do need tighter research. There are controls when the FDA is looking at a plant and how to derive the active ingredients from that plant. And so weather and those sorts of conditions aren't going to affect the research. But I would agree that we need to do the research to really know the effectiveness and what the indications are. I mean, we may well find the cure for cancer if we actually do the research.
Well, actually, GW Pharmaceuticals, the same company that you were speaking of with the Epidiolex, has a patent pending for the use of cannabinoids in the treatment of cancer.
Right.
And that is on its way.
And
it will
I think
happen.
I think you're right. The more we open this up for research, the more we will have competition among pharmaceutical companies, driving down the cost, and really knowing what we are prescribing.
So can I ask one question, sir? Sorry.
No. Do you have a follow-up to your question?
I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay.
Members of the committee, can I say something?
No, not right now.
Okay.
At this time, I want to introduce Ashley Taylor. You've been waiting very patiently and talked to you a lot during session. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Ashley Taylor, and I'm a Kentucky native. And hopefully what I'm getting ready to share with you all will help clear up some of the questions that I've heard and make us feel a little bit better about things in the practical application. Prior to being in this industry, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep who went through the ranks, and I was a pharmaceutical sales manager living in San Francisco when I got my first exposure to what the medical marijuana industry actually looked like. And so that is what was my aha moment. What kind of changed that is when I was seeing patients coming and going and seeing the results, which were much more dramatic than anything I was carrying in my bag at the time. When I say that, that's the pharmaceuticals. So while both are very effective, I think that we can see a lot of overlap in the way that the compliance works, and hopefully we're going to clear up a lot of issues right here. So initially, after we pass legislation, which I'm sure that we will get something going in the next session, it will come down to two different licenses which actually occur. At least this is how it was rolled out for medical marijuana in the state of Colorado. The first of which is your state license, which you'll have to be approved for. And it is actually set up much like Representative Nemus's bill he was speaking of, with the tiered in based on the size of the facility. So there's the same 4 different types of licenses which can occur. One is the medical marijuana center, which is the dispensary. The optional premises cultivation, which is where they grow cannabis, and then we have the marijuana infused products, which is where you take the raw material, extract that, the oils out, and make it into a product for the end user. And then, of course, the fourth is the testing facility, which is independent of all other license holders and licenses that exist. So it's completely independent. It's a third party, which is going to ensure safety for our patients. Secondarily, the cities actually have a position in this where they license for individuals that wish to be in the industry. And those are 2 separate fees. The state, of course, will stay with the state and get dispersed, while the local municipality will do with their money as they choose. Renewal fees are much less than what an initial fee would actually cost, and that's simply because the due diligence that goes into the front side of background checks and making sure people have the financial capability to move forward with the program are done when the first application is sent in. So the way that it will work will be that the local, whatever municipality, 15 districts in the state of Kentucky, they would decide how many different licenses would be issued in each of the business sectors. And that's usually starts off small and then based on market demand would move up. So This is really, I mean, I know there's a lot of pictures on this page, but this right here takes the software application, which is what keeps everyone compliant, and then we have the tangible pieces that sync with that. So in the state of Colorado and in a variety of other states, Metric is the system that is used. It's marijuana enforcement, tracking, recording, and compliance. And that is really what is the glue that holds everything together. You must be a part of this software program if you get a license. Everything has to be entered into this system. You pay a monthly fee to do so. So what you see, there's a plant tag explanation up there, and the plant tag actually stays with each plant, seed, clone through its entire lifeline. There's a number, a specific number that goes in, it's on that tag, which is entered into Metric, and then wherever the plant moves within a facility, that tag would be with it. So you always know where it is. It's radio frequency ID'd. So the governing body in the state of Kentucky, I think Representative Nemus said it was the Kentucky Department of Cannabis Administration. So they would be able to come in at any time, and they have the capability with a handheld wand to be able to wand the room. Every one of those plants would pull up on a screen, and so if there was any kind of confusion as to where, or if somebody has too many plants, somebody doesn't have enough plants, it's very easy to access and to look and make sure. It's so specific that if you have a plant that's in a vegetative state, which is a smaller plant, it is assigned a room within Metric. If it moves to its bloom room or grow room, it actually has to be entered into the computer, and that will show, it will reflect that there has been a room switch. So it is extremely tight. Once a product or a plant is harvested, it will no longer be on a stalk or stem. The raw material is pulled off of that, and at that point, your plant tag becomes a package tag. And you can see that listed up there. And in the computer, you'll take your plant, XYZ123, and then you'll assign that to the package tag. So there is a chain of custody, which is never breached. All right? If there were to be product to leave a facility to go to another license holder, then that has to be accompanied with a manifest. And you can see that's the document that has the green and the white on it. It's very specific. It goes through everything that you could possibly imagine, both license holders, the one where the product or plant originated and the one where it is going to, the individual who will be transporting it, their name, their phone number, the make and model of their car, their license plate number. It also has a time to leave a facility and a time to be expected to be received. Upon receipt of that, when the driver gets there, they have to go back into Metric and accept that package. So again, there's no fail in the chain of command. It is all the way across the board. There's someone accounted for that product. And this is just basically a picture showing you what the tags actually look like. You can see small plants at the top. There's a tag that is assigned to them. Then below, you can see an enlarged picture. When those plants get larger and they move to a different room, that tag moves with them. And it's assigned, and it's shown just on the screen. That is Metric. That's what the actual software application looks like. It's showing one move of a plant to another room, and it's logged. We talked about this just a moment ago. When a plant is no longer in a pot, it's got to be identified somehow, and that's when it gets its package tag. All weights are done at that time upon harvest. You'll have a wet weight, which I think is where a lot of the confusion comes in, thinking that you can pull lots of pounds off a single plant. You're going to lose 50 to 70% of a weight of a plant after it harvests and cures. So there's a variance, and if we have questions about this afterwards, I'm happy to answer them, because this kind of speaks to the importance of being able to grow your own and cultivate. But yes, so everything is weighed, even the waste, any stems, stalks, anything that's going to be discarded. It has to also be weighed and entered into Metric. So every piece of the plant is accounted for along the way. Here you can see your transfer manifest, which is in the smaller photo there. And there's two places that product can go once it has been harvested. The first of which would be to the testing facility, because no product can ever get to a consumer prior to being tested. So if you have raw flower that is going to ultimately end up with a consumer, it first must be tested. And that's when it goes out via the manifest to a third party where it is tested. And you'll see the cannabinoids, the percentage of each that are in there. You'll also be sure to know that there is no chemical residue, which may come from pesticides or herbicides. It tests clean. You'll know that if there's no mold, mildew, or any other type of contaminant that could be of detriment to someone's health. And that's the beauty of a regulated market. versus having people go to the street. This is a clean product. So one of two places it goes when it leaves where it has been grown. It goes to get tested, or it will go to somewhere to be manufactured. After it is manufactured into a product, it would then be forced to go under the same testing that it would had it gone out straight from flower. So the reason you don't test it before it goes to be manufactured is because they may use chemicals or other ingredients when they do that transition process from raw plant material into an oil, a patch, and whatnot. So again, you have the chain of custody, and the beauty of a regulated market is you know exactly what you're getting, the percentages of each cannabinoid that you're going to be getting, because most work synergistically. You're going to get a better enhanced effect from having multiple cannabinoids versus having just one, which is what we have available now. Right? This is actually just some photos of what the packaging facilities would look like. They're under the same scrutiny as any other industry. We abide by OSHA guidelines. We also have the EPA and the Department of Agriculture, which visit us annually for sure, but they also stop by regularly. I mean, on any given day they can be there, and that is of benefit. I think what we'll find in Kentucky is that a lot of the license holders really look to the compliance and governing bodies to help guide. I will tell you this, in my first year out there, I probably called the MED, which was the Marijuana Enforcement Division, thousands of times to make sure I was doing things the right way we were supposed to. And that's what you see. You see, once you take away this stigma, that people there becomes an environment of honesty. And that is where you really start to see people thrive and people to take care of business. Nobody wants to risk losing a license over something silly like not labeling something properly or not doing something per protocol. So people don't risk those kind of things. You also have fire and hazmat, which are also annual inspections, but they come all the time. It's whenever they want to stop by. And I actually think they kind of enjoy coming by because it's been a learning experience, obviously, over the course of the past 4 or 5 years in Colorado. This is a fantastic one. I'm going to go back to this screen right here to show you guys how the labeling and packaging actually plays out. So if flower were to go to a manufacturing facility, the standards that must be met are higher than what our FDA enforces now on labeling. What you have to have on every single package is the ingredients that go back to the soil and the composition of that soil where it was grown. So if you have cocoa and peat and a variety of different grow mediums, all of those are actually listed on the product, whereas you don't see that in food. You're also going to have all ingredients that were used and any potential allergens. So people have gluten allergies, that's going to be on there. Nuts, berries, whatever the case may be, you're going to see all of that listed, or something saying that perhaps the same processing facility was used for those things, just as you see on food packaging today. Now, the really important parts to this are onset of action. So when we're talking about edibles and tinctures, you're going to have that per regulation on each package. It may not take, if you have it with an edible, for instance, you're not going to feel that effect immediately, but it's going to tell you the window of what you might experience. So it might take 25 minutes for you to begin to feel an effect, or it might take up to 2 hours to feel that effect. But you know that. The end user knows that when they come into the situation. Each dose is actually labeled. So if you have 100 milligrams of cannabis in a package, you want to do, 10 milligrams is the starting dose. So each of those 100 dose, every 10 milligrams is literally labeled on it. So there's no confusion as to what you're taking at that time, which is quite nice, and it makes dosing quite easy. The opaque packaging, you can see on the top right, there are it has to be two parts to getting into the packaging. The first of which would be what we all are very familiar with, opening a prescription bottle, childproof, to push down, turn, or do 5 jumping jacks, run around in a circle and hope it opens, that kind of thing. So it's hard to get it open. And
I don't mean to interrupt you, but how are you doing on time?
I'm hurrying as fast as I can.
Oh, I know you're hurrying, but when are you going to be done?
I've got 5 minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Probably not.
Okay, 3 minutes. All right. So as you guys can see, the labeling and packaging is all very clear, and that's designed for the end user to be safe. When we move forward and we're looking at different occupations, everyone that comes into the industry must first go through a background check and register themselves with the state. There's 2 different licenses that can be had, the first of which is a support badge, and that support badge is for an entry-level position, and the second one is with a key badge for someone who is a decision maker. Both of those are you have to pay for those to get them, and every 2 years they have to be renewed. Again, at the front side, they're going to be more expensive. Our business, at the max total, we had 38 employees there. Virtually all of them were from the state of Kentucky, but during a harvest, you actually need to get more employees. So you need to make sure all of those have already been background checked as you move forward and your business grows. This is just talking about some of the wages that we pay and what is kind of across the board. You can see it goes everywhere from your entry-level positions of, minimum wage, $11, which minimum wage in Colorado is a little bit higher than here, all the way up to a $150,000 job. Then we're hiring in lab technicians, chemists, botanists. And it's a very high level of education across the board with specialties, albeit virtually anyone could be licensed to be able to have a support badge and work in the industry. And the same rules and regulations apply. We have workers' compensation. Health insurance can be offered as part of a compensation package. And contrary to popular belief, you actually can bank. So we cut checks to our patients every other week. This is just an example of what the security looks like. One of our facilities per code has 62 cameras in it, and that is a requirement of the state. So if there's any question as to if there's oversight and who's got eyes on it, well, everyone has eyes on it because the enforcement division can come and call your video anytime they want to. Just like the representatives were saying, they have any individual that is a governing body has the ability to come knock on the door whenever they so choose, and you would be needed to show them whatever they ask for. Dispensaries, this is some of our dispensaries also. When you open the light and turn it on and invite people to come in, you're going to have a conversation. Patients are taken care of at that point. In order to get in the door, you must have your medical marijuana card, and you also have to have a state-issued ID that has a photo of it. Or if you're a caregiver, you have to have your own documentation saying that you're doing so. Very tight regulations. Again, you have to abide by any local ordinances. You can't be within certain feet of schools. Cameras, again, are unbelievable.
Is this all in the packet?
Indeed, sir.
Okay.
Indeed. So everything, yes. I anticipated the fact that we probably wouldn't get through all of this, so everything is there for you.
Let me ask you, is this all in House Bill 166?
No, this is what my practical experience is, and it more aligns, honestly, with Representative St. Ange and Nemus's bill, with how it is run. But across the board, everything that is done
Well, I
here
want to
is above
encourage
board.
you to get with them because I would love to see something on paper.
Okay.
Because until we have something on paper, not that that's the finished product, but we can talk all day about stuff, but until we have something on paper to start building the bill, we can't really do anything.
I think we're close.
Eric?
Does anybody have any questions for Ashley first?
Probably.
I'll ask Ashley some questions. I just have a few seconds of remarks.
Oh, go ahead. You have a few seconds. Go ahead.
Okay.
You came a long way.
Well, we have 50-year, United States tax dollars has funded Israel's studies for 50 years. So there is research. And as a conservative taxpayer, I'd like to use that research. Also, I've checked out Minnesota and New York's bills. I believe I would qualify as a patient in any state. It would cost this patient $3,800 a month in New York or Minnesota to be a qualified legal patient. That's not right. And this is something I just picked up the other day. And please think of someone who has to take medicine every day for their life when I say this. If people let the government decide which foods they eat and which medicines they take, their bodies will soon be in as sorry a state as are the souls of those who live under tyranny. Thomas Jefferson.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions for Ashley or Eric? Thank you all for your testimony. I apologize for having for the rush. We will very well have more hearings on this. Again, I would encourage you to get something on paper, talk to Representative St. Ange and Representative Nemus, and thank you for all your hard work. Everyone that traveled here today to support this legislation, why don't you stand up so we can see who you are? thank you for taking the time to be here. I see some faces out there that have been here many, many times, and I know you're all very committed to it. Thank you for being here to support.
Thank you, members of the committee. We truly appreciate your time. It's been
Thank you
very
so
helpful.
much.
Thank you. Now, would